dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of Parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and get in, losers, we're going shopping.
My name is Scott Daly, and this is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of bad moms, bigoted food courts, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we're covering the new arc, Polarize, chapters 10.1 and 10.2. After taking a few days to recover, Victoria is ready to start putting things back together. First up, she and Sveta meet with her mom and dad, which goes exactly as you would expect, and then a chrysalis breakthrough meets at the mall to do some shopping and some talking. Like any start to a new arc, these chapters are doing a lot of legwork to set up the stories that are to come, the conflicts, the events, the focus that is to come within the next 8 to 20 chapters, depending on how long Wildbow makes this one. Matt, what did you think of these two chapters?
Well, as you said, it's been a lifetime since we started an arc, so I'm having to remember what it's like to do this part of the arc where we're positioning things. We're not quite sure what the focus of the arc is going to be yet. There's no cape fighting. It's all character stuff. It's all people touching base, communicating, setting up, and introducing what the underlying conflicts are going to be and what the underlying themes are going to be. And this arc does a great job of it. I like the shift in tone. I like the shopping trip a lot. I like all of the conversations. This is a chapter these are two chapters that are full of dialogue, great dialogue that is, I think, moving the plot ball forward and moving some of our character arcs forward. So it's all really fun and exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, to me, I think we're seeing us move into like refocusing the story. Like this big event happened. I think the goddess arc and the things that led up to the goddess arc and the kind of the whirlwind that was going on with Victoria for probably 3 arcs now has kind of come to a close. All the big conflicts are gone now. Like, we get reports that the wardens and everyone that's been overseas is coming back. Things are in like a temporary lull, a temporary calm. And so the story is shifting to what's next, what's going to happen now. And that's a lot of what these two chapters focus on. And I think that's probably going to be what a large, majority of this arc ends up focusing on. But it feels like we're in like a new section of the book as well.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get on into first some announcements. And so the only announcement is that the Halloween contest ends tomorrow as of the day of this release. So it ends on November 1st, 2018 is the year.
We got some over the weekend because I think there were some Halloween parties over the weekend, and we got some people sent in some stuff they did over the weekend. Very exciting, great costumes. Hoping to see some more come in before the end of the deadline. But yeah, it's coming up. I hope this works out for us. This was something we just kind of tried on a whim, and I hope you guys are as excited about it as we are.
It'll be a success if we've convinced a single person to wear a Parahumans costume.
That's true.
All right, so now for the community spotlight, where we read what people wrote in last week's thread. And the discussion question to frame the discussion was, is it coherent to offer second chances if there are some things that are unforgivable? Can there be such a thing as unforgivable?
So, Matt, sometimes with our questions, we write them in such a way that we're kind of leading people to the thing that we want to talk about, And I kind of think that's what we did with this question, because you and I were talking about this before we sat down to record last week. We were talking about this concept of calling something unforgivable and what that means. And we were kind of leading down, in my mind, I was leading down people of the answer of, well, what is and isn't unforgivable is really up to the person who was wronged, not everyone else around them. And I was very happy to see that a lot of people echoed that sentiment. So I think sometimes people see these questions and are like, no, you can't say that. And I was like, no, your answer was exactly what I was going for. We were just phrasing it in a way to make you go there, which maybe isn't fair. I don't know. I think that's a smart way to lead a discussion. I'm not sure.
Well, and I think there was a wide variety of answers here.
Yeah.
I was I thought of the question and I was like, I have some firm thoughts on this, but I want to see. I want to stimulate a discussion on this, and like, I don't even like everyone's feedback was so good and comprehensive and nuanced that I'm just like, I have not like after we discuss all these answers, I'm gonna have nothing to add. I'm just gonna be like, yep, that's everyone covered all of the complexity of the issue, and many people introduced nuance that I hadn't even thought of, honestly. So
that's awesome.
It's
exactly what you were going for then too.
Exactly.
Good job, everyone. A+ for all of you.
Yes.
This is why I could never be a teacher, because I'd just be throwing A's everywhere. Because who wants to not get an A? Nobody wants that.
Nobody. And also, like a million of you answered these, so we're going to go through them pretty quickly.
We're going to go pretty fast.
So Bisexual Punch Party says that forgiveness is up to the wronged party, so it's subjective whether it's deserved. Being forgiven by someone else is a separate thing from giving yourself a second chance. Being forgiven can be helpful in letting you start your second chance, and forgiving yourself is critical to making use of a second chance.
There's the one I saw where I said, yes, that's the answer I would have given. I agree.
I hadn't even thought about that aspect of forgiving yourself as being something that couldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, I think it's a really important part of the process, and it seems like, you know, I think a lot of times you say, you know, you've got to forgive yourself as well, and people make it seem like that's like, no, it's the person that's wrong that has to forgive you, and you don't like that. Forgiving yourself is out of your hands. And it's like, well, no, I think it's part of it. Like, you got to recognize that you're a human being that messes up sometimes, and just the fact that you're seeking to get to a place of self-forgiveness, I think, is acknowledgement that you recognize the severity of the thing that you've done.
Yeah, I think I'll have more to say about that when we get to some of these points on repentance.
All right. Next up, we have Sarah Penguin, who their post considers Valkyrie, Bonesaw, and Nobog 3 people who did absolutely terrible things, and each of them got a second chance. She compares them with the Fallen, who claim that they didn't get a second chance. The Fallen that says, you guys judged us before we did anything wrong. The difference, Sarah Penguin says, is that the 3 monsters were actually remorseful and wanted a chance to be different. And the Fallen didn't seem to want that. And I think that's a fair argument. We do have these 3 people who absolutely, like, unquestionably did monstrous, terrible things, but are actively working towards making up for it in their own way.
Right. I think that's something that other people will point out using maybe slightly different words.
Yeah.
Is this idea that it's extra difficult to forgive someone if they're not remorseful.
Yeah.
Not that you're,
Not that it's impossible.
Obligated.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Right. Zizivan says that they discuss the distinction between forgiveness, which is offered by the victim, repentance, which is offered by the offender, and reconciliation, which is the state of a renewed or repaired relationship. In the story, Carol thinks that Victoria should offer forgiveness to Amy, even though Amy hasn't convincingly offered repentance. And even if Victoria were to do this, it wouldn't result in an authentic reconciliation, because there wouldn't be that repentance, and there wouldn't be a meeting in the middle. Then they go on to say, though, that Victoria can still be in favor of Amy getting a second chance on a societal level for pragmatic reasons, even though she doesn't forgive her.
Yeah, and I think that's, kind of what Victoria had done up until the events of last arc. She personally was not interested in offering her forgiveness, but she was not, like, actively seeking that she be thrown in prison or anything. I think to Victoria, whatever societal second chance that Amy had was squandered the second she declared herself queen of an entire planet.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that in Victoria's mind, she was already, I think it's fair to say she was ambivalent about the whole idea of second chances, bordering on wanting them, but feeling weird about it.
Yeah.
And with Amy's situation, she's like, this is what happens.
Yeah.
I told you.
Yep. Everything I said has come to pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, EXE JPEG Windows Media Viewer says some people can't forgive some things, particularly if it hurts them bad enough that the perpetrator is unrepentant, and coercing forgiveness, like Carol is doing, will ultimately cause more damage. You can tell our answers had a particular bone to pick with a certain mom. I wonder how many of these answers were written after the first chapter of this arc.
Yeah. There's a few answers that take this tack of like being very empirical, I'll say, about unforgivable. Like, because I had a certain stance on whether something could be unforgivable, and a lot of people were like, look, if someone can't forgive something, if they just like can't bring themselves to forgive it, then like from a scientific third party observer point of view, wouldn't you call that unforgivable?
Yeah.
And I'm like, interesting. I that's not how I use the word, but and I don't know if that's how the word should be used either, but it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. I think sometimes we use the word as more of like a flavor adjective to describe the level of something someone did was bad. Like if we're trying to get across how bad someone did something, we'll say, oh, they did this unforgivable act. And like people are saying, that forgiveness is very personal and very based on the person that was wronged. So I think words mean things, and we kind of overuse that. I think that's what led to this whole conversation between you and I, is that this idea that we label things unforgivable when the only person that can really label something truly unforgivable is the person who had the thing done to them.
Yeah. There's this old story. I don't remember which one it is. It's one of those old timey short stories or novels or something. I'm sure someone will tell me what it is, where the basis is like this like wayward brother comes back into the town and he did all these bad things, but everyone wants to forgive him because they like him. And but the priest doesn't want to forgive him immediately. He wants him to like have to repent and go through the normal process of absolution. And everyone's like, don't be a stick in the mud. And then they find out that he's like the other brother who actually they don't like, even though he did the same level of bad things roughly.
Oh boy.
And they hate him and they want to kill him. And the priest is perfectly consistent and wants him to repent and go through the process of absolution. And he's like, you people basically, you were willing to forgive the first brother because in your eyes, you didn't see there as being anything to forgive. If there's something to forgive, that means it's actually hard to forgive. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's an interesting framing of it.
Yeah. So I think to get back to exe JPEG Windows Media Viewer's actual answer, I think he's absolutely right that and the answer to the question is, can some things be unforgivable? The quick and dirty answer to that is, yeah, if the person that was wronged can't forgive the act, then it's an unforgivable act, right?
I suppose. Yeah. And I'm just not entirely comfortable with that usage because it's like, well, I mean, what does can't forgive mean, actually?
Yeah, that's true.
It means you haven't yet, right? Right. For any time t, you might forgive them later.
Oh, Matt the scientist.
I mean, yeah, it's like unforgivable is like a permanent statement about the nature of what was done, right?
Right.
So I don't think you can make that. I don't think you can do that. People change. The person who did the crime changes. The person who would be the forgiver could have a personal change, and then it could become a forgivable act suddenly. So it's like, well, then it wasn't unforgivable. Anyway, we'll move on.
Let's move on. All right.
ZTYTHYZ says that they don't think forgiveness should involve acting like the perpetrator never did the things they did. So Riley gets a second chance, for example, but she's still kept in some form of custody because it would be foolish and naive to just let her run free. Likewise, it's foolish to let Amy off the hook completely, even if Victoria can forgive her on an emotional level.
I like that.
I like this. There's actually, what's interesting is there are later answers that pretty much contradict this, and I like both sides of the argument. I haven't really decided which one I prefer.
That's really cool. Next up, we have literally, you wrote Bismarck. I think it's Bismarck.
It's Bismarck. I'm correcting it in the script. There we go.
There is a big difference between society forgiving someone and the victim doing so. Literally, Bismarck says, perpetrators are in a sense forgiven by society after they've served their sentence, even while the victim may not have forgiven them at all. So I think that's again fair, and that's a good answer to the is something unforgivable. The thing that I find fascinating about this is, and you and I were kind of talking about this last week, around like some of our past relationships and how like that me personally, like if someone has personally wronged me in a past relationship, like it broke my heart or what have you, I feel like I need to forgive them for my own sense of like healthiness and well-being. But like as a friend of the person who's been wronged, I don't feel the same sense of requirement and duty to forgive, because I'm like, no, I hate that person. Screw that. Fuck them. Like, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's forgiveness seems to be so much of the framing of the situation, who it's coming from and who it's going to, that kind of thing.
And also, I can completely see forgiving someone and still never wanting to have anything to do with them again.
Right.
Which may be a bit paradoxical, because I'm like, well, then you're not, basically what you're implying is that you expect them to behave poorly in the future.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I do actually. I don't think they've changed. I just am taking that burden off of both them and myself, so that I can move on.
I mean, that gets back to what forgiveness is, which is a question and a conversation we've already had here, and we'll probably have again and again and again. Just because I don't think there's a simple, absolute answer to what it means. I think just like, can you forgive is personal to the person who was wronged. What that forgiveness looks like is incredibly personal to the person who was wronged.
Yeah, exactly. FIP Industries offers an interesting perspective that all things become forgivable after everybody involved has died and a few generations pass, because even if people still know of the deeds of, say, Attila the Hun, nobody really feels injured by those deeds anymore. Yeah,
that's a perspective I hadn't really considered, but that is very true, that the universe forgives all things eventually.
Yeah, and I feel like this is one of those things where the language is just the limitation, because we clearly mean something different by saying, like, nobody actually forgave Attila the Hun.
Right.
It's just that nobody cares anymore.
Right. It's just our propensity to feel wronged by Attila the Hun's actions decays over time.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Elves 11 brings up the fact that Taylor let Sophia out of prison, not on the basis of forgiveness, but on the basis of her own personal growth. Sophia got a second chance because Taylor wasn't afraid of her anymore, not because Taylor even expected her to behave better. That's a really good point. And I like that as an example of forgiveness for my sake, not for yours, right? Like to me, that would be Taylor forgiving Sophia in a way that, like you were just saying, like, I know you're bad. I know you're going to keep doing bad things, but I can't keep this in my heart anymore. It's too destructive and painful for me. So I am going to, release this burden on the two of us, and let you free physically and metaphorically.
Yeah. And also pragmatically, like, you're more used to us out of jail than in jail. And so I'm not going to let my prejudice interfere with that, which is a way of, like, setting down the burden, like you said.
Yeah.
Slice of Pie says that forgiveness is more about the capacity of the wronged person to forgive than it is about the act that was committed. We've seen a lot of characters in Parahumans who have the hardest time forgiving themselves, actually.
Yeah. I think we're going to see another one today.
Yeah. Once again, I like this idea of it being perhaps even harder to forgive yourself than it is to forgive other people, because when you forgive other people, there's no voice saying, I don't deserve it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're your own worst critic, right? And
right.
And in everything you do, yeah. Placid Platypus says, it's not really a second chance if there's not an actual avenue for things to work out better this time. And also, acts themselves aren't intrinsically unforgivable. It always depends on the context and who the judger is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that first part is what I was indicating when I said that there was the previous poster said, it's foolish and foolhardy to just act like the bad thing never happened and just give the person carte blanche. But this person is saying, it's not really a second chance unless you actually give them, like, the potential to have an actual second chance. And it's like, okay, well, there is a tension between those two. I think there's a compromise between them where you set it up so that Riley doesn't just have freedom to roam the streets, but also she has a support structure and enough freedom that she doesn't feel chafed, and so forth. I like that there's kind of two sides to it.
Yeah, I like that, because the idea that, like, you're sitting like you're sitting in the chair about to be executed for a crime, and, like, the person that you wronged walks up to you and says, I forgive you, as they throw the switch. It's like, well, did you? Did you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. What was that worth exactly?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Muns for College says that intellectualizing forgiveness isn't very useful because it's a personal choice made not to fulfill some ethical prerogative, but to come to a sense of closure and peace. Whether or not something is forgivable depends on whether the wrong party is emotionally able to forgive. So the latter part of that is reiterating that idea that unforgivability is on the basis of like the empirical question of whether the person can bring themselves to make that that emotional movement. Too bad if you think intellectualizing forgiveness isn't very useful, because that's all I'm capable of doing is intellectualizing things. Sorry. But and also like and this is my opinion, of course, but like I feel like you do have an ethical prerogative to forgive people if you feel like the reason you're mad at them is not actually like ethically sound. Do you understand? Like I mean like you can be really mad at someone who didn't actually do anything wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like ethically.
Yeah.
Like just because they hurt you, all that means is that you feel hurt. Like it's entirely possible that you're just being stupid, and in which case it is ethically incumbent on you to forgive them.
That's a good. That's true.
Which is a way of growing, a way of being an adult. Basically, I don't know. Perhaps I'm projecting onto the situation.
Yeah, I mean I'm trying to think of a situation in these books that would fall under that kind of scenario, and I'm having trouble finding them because like the wrong that was committed is pretty clear and devastating in these stories. But I mean, there are like not to go back to relationships and breakups again, but it's like you broke my heart and dumped me, and now I can't forgive you for that. It's like, well, I mean, did that person do like they just didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, and they told you so.
Yeah.
And that's not like that's like and not ethically like a bad choice.
Exactly. Relationships are a thing that most people have experience with, and is probably people's largest experience with like people with being mad at people and not being able to forgive them. And it's an example of being like eventually you just grow out of it usually, right? 10 years later it's really hard to be mad about that anymore because you're like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Who cares? Yeah. I mean, in fact, it's probably better for me.
I would say that I did feel a responsibility to reach a place of forgiveness in my personal situation. But again, that's something that's incredibly personal to each and every person. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to blanketly declare, yes, you have an ethical responsibility to offer forgiveness anytime someone's wronged you. But there definitely are situations in which I think you probably do.
Not anytime, I don't think. But
yeah, well, anytime we're talking about every time, then we're painting with too broad a brush. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Although, go ahead.
Sorry, we've got so many of these. Next up is Kaosubalu version 2. Did they have to make a new account, or were they always version 2?
Maybe they were always version 2.
I can't keep track. Is it really a second chance if it comes with terms and conditions? If they aren't given access to the support systems that would keep them out of villainy, did they really get a second chance? Did Riley get a second chance?
And yeah, I think that actually, goes hand in hand with what we were just saying. Like there's a middle ground between letting Riley roam the streets and just throwing her in jail.
Yeah.
But it's not I don't want to be too pat with that answer, because it's like, well, doesn't that kind of depend on whether Riley seems to be thriving or not? Like if you look at her situation and she's doing just as poorly as if she were in jail, then no, I don't think she did get a second chance. But we don't really know. We don't really know how she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Googleplex Byte thinks that things are unforgivable when forgiveness doesn't work. For example, forgiving Amy wouldn't help anyone because she doesn't understand what she did wrong. I like this a lot because this is one of those nuances I hadn't thought of, where it's not just that point of, can you forgive the person? It's like, okay, let's say Victoria does forgive her. It doesn't help because Amy just does the same stupid shit again.
Right. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's I think that's very true, that forgiving Amy would not help Amy until Amy recognizes the depth of the wrongness that she did. But I do think that forgiving Amy would help Victoria regardless of Amy's awareness or unawareness of it. But I mean, again, that's my personal opinion. I'm a raised Catholic person, so I'm like, forgive everyone always. Forgiveness everywhere. No, it doesn't matter how bad it is. That's the person I am. So I recognize that is not something people share. But so I look at forgiveness as a thing for your benefit more than the benefit of the person you're forgiving. Not that it doesn't have benefit for the person that you're forgiving. It absolutely does. We've seen it in this book. We've seen that the book stance on this is that it absolutely can have wonderful benefits. Rain being forgiven really did help him in that moment. But it can be helpful for yourself as well.
Right. It seems like it would almost be beneficial if we had two different words, one of them for like therapeutic forgiveness and one of them for like practical forgiveness.
Yeah. And, I bet there are different words. It's just English vocabulary has shrunk so much. We just don't use all these words. It's like, they all mean the same thing, right? There's no subtlety in our words anymore.
Yeah. Somebody brought up the word. Oh, actually, it's the next answer that they brought up this word. So this next answer kind of reflects what we were just talking about. So
cool.
I think it's a good segue.
All right. The next answer is from Tisserwat, who wrote an lengthy essay with citations. I think they were one of the ones that did this before, right?
I think
Excellent.
so.
Excellent. I love these.
Yeah.
But they do give a too long didn't read that says, it depends on the person. In a little bit more detail, forgiveness entails forbearing from allowing the offense to continue to affect one's emotions and attitudes toward the transgressor. Second chances have more to do with practical allowances rather than attitudes. They also bring up an important factor that I don't think anybody else has framed this way: necessity. Can you get away with not forgiving a person, or do you need to in order to move on with practical matters? And also, remorse can lead to repentance, which can lead to forgiveness, but forgiveness can also invoke remorse, which leads to repentance. I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and mention in the course of discussing that answer that a later poster specifically brings up the example of necessity of, like, if Byron hadn't found a way to forgive Tristan, it was Hero of Old Iron, said if Byron hadn't found a way to forgive Tristan, then it would have just made both of their lives harder. It would have made Byron's life harder and Tristan's. It might have even made their lives impossible. So on the one hand, it's like big of him to have done that. On the other hand, he kind of needed to survive. And I don't think there's anything, I don't think that diminishes the forgiveness, frankly.
No, that's what I was about to say. I don't think it does at all. I think forgiveness out of necessity does not make it easy forgiveness, right? It's still really hard to forgive people that have done bad stuff to you, regardless of whether you feel like you have to or not. But I do agree that there is absolutely a necessity-based forgiveness that can occur, and the Tristan Byron situation is a perfect example of that, because you can't like, Victoria can at least like walk away from Amy, right? Like, I don't forgive you. I'm leaving. Go get away from me. Go to your planet. Go.
Yeah.
The brothers don't have that option. They just don't.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And finally, lastly, I think we went on for half an hour, Matt. So much for our normal length episode. Lemony 2 says, people are a resilient species and can probably eventually forgive anything. Ultimately, I think Ward will have Victoria decide that what Amy did was truly unforgivable, and then push past that and decide to forgive her anyway. Oh, I like that. That's a perfect way to end this. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I think it both values the horribleness of what she did to her, as well as come to a place of real, recovery and growth.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's really great.
All right, let's get on into it.
Yeah, let's talk about those chapters we were supposed to talk about.
Yeah. All right, 10.1. And this arc opens on a literal endorphin high. Victoria has been exercising. She's hanging out with Sveta. They're going shopping later on. The opening line of the arc is, though, it's hard to know where to draw the line sometimes, Sveta confessed.
Yeah, I love the opening of this thing. After what we were saying earlier, after 2 to 3 arcs in a row of near constant action, near constant bad shit happening to our main characters, Victoria has taken the time to recuperate. Like, this is her day 3, her consolidation phase. They had, they got better physically. They kind of just rested, and now it's time to move into the harder stuff. She's clean, she's stronger, she's out of costume, and she's ready to take on the world again. And by world, I of course mean Carol.
Yeah.
And I love how that's set up right away here in this line. No equipment, but with the buzzed, clean feeling and endorphins, I had all of the emotional armor and preparation I can pull together for seeing family. It's like, oh, like I love it. We established here right at the very beginning, this is what this chapter is going to be about. She's like girding herself for another family conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that line, that opening line. It's hard to know where to draw the line sometimes, Sveta confessed. I don't want to read too much into this chapter and this arc based off just this one thing, but I think it's pretty clear from at least these two chapters that Sveta's time in the spotlight, the ward spotlight, is either coming or here. A lot of both these chapters focus on her and how she's doing and the personal difficulties she's having. I mean, this whole shopping thing was something that Victoria promised her ages ago, so it's happening now. And I think this question that were posed, the first line of the arc, could perhaps be central to Sveta's struggle throughout wherever her story is going to take her. That I don't know where to draw the line sometimes, and I don't know exactly where that's going to go. But I just want us to be aware of that and to be considering that as we watch as her conflict really spins up.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. I love the opening lines, and I love stuff like this because we can't really read too much into it with certainty. You know, we can extrapolate on what that could mean for Sveta, but it's not some kind of key that magically unlocks the whole arc for us and lets us know what's coming. Maybe in retrospect, it'll be ironic in some way, you know, but I like that kind of thing because it's fun to think about, but it doesn't spoil anything, for example.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy this bit of text here. So Victoria's quote, trying to think of how I could diplomatically phrase a response. And then she ends her response with, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Victoria, future diplomat of fucking Wiseville.
Yeah. We get at least one of those in this chapter, actually.
We do. Yeah. Someone in the Discord talked about that potentially being a 3-beat of Victoria saying fucking why. Mm-hmm. And yes, I mean, basically it's a character trait. Like it's one of her go-to phrases. So she uses it. She uses it in a little different context in this chapter, and a little bit different phrasing. But I think we've seen it at least 3 times. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it fits her because it's like she wants to understand. She wants to understand people's motivations. And
she's exasperated because why?
Yes,
fucking why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what the fuck Sveta is talking about is that she wants some clarity in terms of boundaries. She says she doesn't really know where Victoria's are until she's, quote, in contact with them, or until Victoria is already in a very bad place.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very valid concern for someone who admittedly hasn't had a lot of friends and has had this horrible life. A lot of what Sveta is experiencing throughout these chapters and throughout this whole book so far is entirely new to her, right? I mean, she was in a lab for most of her life, then she got out, was with a group of people very briefly before they all betrayed her and broke her heart, and really all she's experienced is Weld, and we'll see later that even that is something she's unsure and scared about. So, you know, a lot of her concerns are very understandable from that perspective. And we already know that Victoria can be tough to read sometimes. And I like the wrinkle in this Victoria is tough to read, because we saw last week that Tristan could tell that Victoria was like zoning out and having a tough time. But I think the ability to detect that something's wrong and the ability to know what it is that's wrong and what is the proper way to react to that wrong thing are two very different things. So while Victoria isn't as good at hiding that something's wrong as she thinks she is, I think people are still very hard pressed to figure out from her what exactly is going on and how can I actually help.
Yeah, and we've been saying for a few arcs now that these folks need to talk, and this policy of don't ask and don't push if you encounter resistance has just resulted in there being all of these unaddressed, unclarified boundaries. Not just for Victoria, but kind of for everyone. And so it's really good that they're having this conversation that we see in these chapters where it's like, hey, let's just actually talk about all those things, even if they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's basically what Victoria moves to next, right? Based off of Sveta's admission.
Yeah. So Victoria's been thinking about this too, of course, how to adapt to the boundaries and the secrets within the team. And Chris's recent actions underline how much it can cost for the team to keep secrets. So, and Victoria takes ownership for part of that failure because Jessica asked her to watch the team also. And basically they kind of agree, but perhaps the time for secrets is over.
Yeah, I really loved this whole interaction. I love the callback to those It's Complicated cards, things that absolutely served their purpose back at the start of the story, but are probably doing more harm than good these days. It's complicated can't be the reason why you're not dealing with your stuff anymore, the reason why you're hiding your stuff anymore. In fact, the reason that it's complicated, like the reason that the issue with the person is complicated is like the reason why you should be dealing with it and the reason why you should be sharing it. Like if it's complicated, that should mean, okay, well then we need to talk about it instead of the opposite.
Yeah. And of course it's always better to discuss these things in like a casual setting so that they don't blow up in a combat setting.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing here in these two chapters, and it kind of set up here and then I think paid off in a discussion later in the second chapter, is this new focus of this new goalpost of things are going on. We've talked about recovery as this theme of the story over and over again throughout all these episodes so far because, well, it is. But I look at this interaction between Sveta and Victoria and the one that's going to happen in the next chapter, and I see a group that has decided that the secrets and the It's Complicated card, these things that have helped us survive, these coping mechanisms, have been working, but we need more than that. It needs to go beyond that. Perhaps it's time to work to get better. Perhaps it's time to address the problem. And those secrets, those It's Complicated cards, this kind of eggshell state which we approach each other to is impeding that. Or as Victoria so succinctly puts it here, I want to have the chops and not be so shaky when doing it. So I want to be able to survive, but also to improve my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But so the thing I love about this is this is a great conversation and it's so great. And I'm so proud of our characters for coming to this realization. But Victoria does kind of deflect a little bit here. Because like Sveta starts this whole thing with, I don't know where your line is, and I'm afraid that I'm constantly crossing your line, and you haven't communicated to me like where this is. And Victoria is basically like, yeah, we all need to do that. The whole group needs to do that. That's something I've been thinking about with the whole group.
Yeah.
and they both discuss this, like agree that that's probably true. Like that the whole group needs to do that, but she didn't like. Sveta's like, I don't know where your line is. And it's like, yeah, we need to share more. Okay, good talk. And it was like, it's like she avoided actually sharing more.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that when I was writing the summary of the discussion, because I was like, it seems like they're going to talk about Victoria's boundaries, and then the conversation just takes a sharp turn into talking about like the abstract concept of boundaries, and then it just and then it doesn't go beyond that at this point in time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think Victoria does that on purpose, but like she clearly doesn't. She's very uncomfortable talking about those things, so she doesn't.
Well, and I think her nature is kind of to look at things like from an overarching high-level strategy point of view. So she takes this note and says, yes, this is something we can apply to the team, because she's in consolidation mode, right? Like she's wanting to bring the team back together, seek people out that have these ties to us and strengthen that whole group unit. And she sees this as a way to do it. So she like runs off with this, how this will change our team-wide strategy instead of focusing on, Sveta's specific Victoria-focused concern.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So they're coming off of 2 days of rest and recuperation after the fiasco with the Parahuman prison. Our incarcerated team members are free, but only because nobody knows what to do with them. And now Victoria is diving back into the most cutthroat battle of all. She's going to see her parents. This
will make the fight with Long look like a dragon petting zoo or something. I do love that beat about how the incarcerated team members are free, but only because no one knows what to do with it. And that's like kind of the state we're in these first two chapters and possibly throughout the rest of the arc is we're like in the eye of some, not the eye of the storm, but we're like in this lull after the action, and we're just like, no one is sure what's gonna happen next, so we're just kind of waiting. And that's the same thing with these guys, is they're just kind of waiting until something's gonna happen.
Right. They don't know what's gonna happen with their criminal members. They don't know what's gonna happen with Amy. And they just have to wait for the other shoe to drop. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I love about the lead up to this Carol conversation is the setup, though. Sveta is here as our eternal optimist, and she gives this line that's like, hey, upside, teeny tiny upside, you get to watch them eat crow. And Victoria's response is just so perfect. I sighed. I shook my head. No, I shook my head. Like,
Yeah.
like Sveta's all like, this is going to be so great. You were absolutely right about Amy. You were always right. They're going to see that. They're going to acknowledge it. You're going to get the respect that you deserve. No. That's not how these people operate.
I can imagine this visually so easily.
Yeah. There was a part of me that like really wanted to believe that Victoria's like inability to even assume that her mom was going to admit that she was right was her being a little harsh on her mom here. Like, there was part of me that was like, I really wanted to believe that was true, but we just knew better. We just knew better. And as we walk into the door, as we walk into the restaurant and see her parents, I think the book makes it very clear how this is going to go, because she looks at her parents, they look back at her, and neither smiled. And in that one moment, as they look up her and don't smile, we know for sure this is going to go bad.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you're in trouble when your parents aren't happy to see you.
Yep.
And you're one of their grown children.
Yep.
So they all go and they sit together at a booth at a nearby deli, I think. And Sveta and Victoria are sitting across from Carol and Mark. And of course, the first order of business with Victoria is Victoria's favorite topic, Amy. So I just want to like step back from it and talk about how this is all set up before we go into the back and forth. We've had a few instances of Victoria and Carol butting heads, talking past each other, and generally not communicating well. And to be clear, it's mostly been Victoria not communicating well because she gets extremely emotional and upset, triggered, not to put too fine a point on it, and Carol not communicating well because she sucks at it, and she sucks at listening, and she has a certain view of how things are and how they're going to be. But here in this conversation, we have two extra parties, Mark sitting by Carol and Sveta sitting by Victoria, and these two new interlopers have important perspectives on their counterparts. Sveta can validate Victoria's perspective from an objective viewpoint, having been in the asylum with her. Mark has a better and possibly more objective understanding of Carol and her quirks than maybe anybody else. So it's taking this pre-existing thread of conflict and interaction between these characters and giving us a kind of another angle on it. Yeah,
I think that's a really great succinct framing of how this is and exactly how everything goes. I think it also kind of like this idea that they each have backup on their side kind of supports this idea that they both came to this conversation ready for a fight. They're mentally prepared for this going bad. Mark's there kind of to serve as Carol translator, but also like Carol like hold backer, and Sveta's there to back up Victoria. Absolutely. I think Victoria shows this with her reaction to Sveta's little joke, that she was expecting this. Carol shows it by how she starts the conversation, Matt. The first thing she says to her daughter is, "You didn't answer your emails. My mom scolded me." She's already on the offensive. It hasn't even started yet, and she's already attacking. She's already pushing Victoria. She's mad, and we'll learn a little bit more about why exactly she's mad as we go through it.
Yeah.
Mark, on the other hand, is trying really hard to play that politician. Like, all his statements at the opening are things like, being as objective as I can, I think this. Let's think about this. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria's doing a good job at not getting really pissed off toward the beginning.
Yeah.
But Carol does not seem to have any like breaks at all.
No.
Like, not even to slow down.
No.
So as we get into the conversation, her dad gives us this awesome moment early on. "If I can," Sveta jumped in, "I know this is a family matter and I'm not family." "You're close enough," my dad said. And then he kind of goes on to elaborate on what he means, and Sveta becomes extremely flustered by it.
Oh, it's a wonderful moment, and this wonderful Sveta moment is only overshadowed by the really wonderful Sveta moment we get in the next chapter. But I think it's giving it to do here is great. I love that the story takes the time to point out just what this means to her, that she's kind of taken aback and like honored by this small little thing. And I think that really matters in the context of what she does next, because she goes after Carol pretty hard here, and I think Carol deserves it, especially in this case. But she's just been like invited into this family. Like, Sveta is a person who has never had a family, or one that she can remember at least, and she's so honored to be invited into this family. And then she has the wherewithal and the guts to, after being invited into this family, to go hard at the matriarch of it. And I think that kind of demonstrates just how passionate she is about this, just how sure she is and how comfortable she is that Victoria's side, in at least this argument, is the right one.
Yeah, I feel a bit embarrassed this is only now occurring to me, but like, it's probably a little bit impossible for Sveta specifically to be objective here, actually, because Sveta, like, you know, we've talked about how all these breakthrough members have things in common with each other in kind of a complex multidimensional Venn diagram. Well, what Sveta has in common with Victoria is someone taking her, messing with her mind, messing with her body, and leaving her, you know, with a mutated body and mind, which is what Amy did. So Sveta, and we've seen that Sveta has not only not forgiven Cauldron, but probably would get pissed off if you implied that she should. So for her especially, it's very difficult for her to conceive of Carol's point of view. Yeah.
So I think she serves less as an independent observer and more just definitely team Victoria in this whole argument. Which, I mean, I think Victoria needs, because I think it at least, I don't want to get too far into like ragging on Carol. I think she says some really dumb, stupid things in this thing. And I think her position, like when you really analyze like where she's coming from, you understand it. It doesn't make it okay. You understand it. But I think Victoria needed backup in this one, because some of the shit is just terrible.
Yeah, right. And Sveta is basically arguing along the lines that she would argue if she could kind of keep her head on straight.
Right.
So like, for example, Sveta frames the conversation as like, hey, maybe we shouldn't put the unstable, extremely powerful girl in charge of a whole planet. And then Carol counters that Amy has changed, which I don't know if you heard her say this exact thing before, but yeah, this is her position. Amy has changed. And she also insists that there's so much more to this. Those are Carol's words.
Right.
And if Amy had a supportive sister, just think how much more stable she would be.
Not a good look, Carol.
Yeah.
I kind of want to wait till we finish the conversation to really dive deep into her, but we're not. I don't think we're gonna. I don't think our tact here is let's defend Carol. Her actions here are shitty. Like, she never comes out and says, Victoria, this is all your fault, but she gets about as close as you can to saying that without actually saying that.
Like, I see where she's coming from, but she's just like being willfully blind to several important things.
Right. And she's being, I think that the thing is that Carol is just being a slave to her fear just as much as she's always been. And she's just allowing it to control her in a way that she's making dumb, stupid decisions and saying things she'll regret. Like, for example, if Amy took it upon herself to touch villains and alter their broken reward cycles, if Amy wanted to give them a conscience, if Amy wanted to fix whatever was broken in their physiology that made them aggressive, I'm not about to say no. That's a really dumb thing to say. Yeah, like, I love that Sveta like basically calls out that exactly like thing. That's like, you said that in front of your daughter who she did this to?
It's insane anyway. I mean, it's
okay. Yeah. Outside of that, outside of the Victoria context, it's a nutso thing to say.
Like, if it were not Amy, but rather like a team of like legally empowered heroes, perhaps, and if the villain were consenting to it. That's not what they're talking about.
No.
They're talking about Amy doing this.
Yeah, we did that to prisoners in the old days, right? And it was terrible. Like we would lobotomize people. And
yeah, I mean, I guess my stance on this is if somebody comes to you and says, you have the power to give me a conscience, you have the power to take away my aggression, could you please do that? Then I don't see any ethical problem with doing that. But that's not.
That's not what. Yeah. I mean, it's literally framed here. If Amy took it upon herself, it's a terrible, terrible thing to say. And I was thrown. I was like, "Are you got to be fucking kidding me?" That, like, in context of who you're sitting in front of, it's terrible. Removed from that, it's still just as bad.
Yeah. So to be slightly fair to her parents, they apparently missed the part of the story where Amy declared herself the villain queen of Shin.
Yeah, it's kind of an important part of the whole thing. And I think how the two parents react to this news is very telling. Mark is basically just like, "Oh, we didn't know that." And Carol's like, "Doesn't matter."
Yeah. Nothing that you say can matter.
Yeah.
Carol elaborates on her argument that what's important to Amy is to provide a support structure. And I think it's worthwhile to kind of step back again from the back and forth and sketch out the core difference in perspectives, because Carol fundamentally wants to give Amy another chance, and she wants to do everything possible to make that second chance work out, kind of like some of our answers to this discussion question.
Yeah.
So she's saying, a solid support structure, something like forgiveness, would be required. And then Victoria counters, why aren't we holding her accountable? Why shouldn't we judge her on the basis of her history? And that's the other side of that dichotomy, that's saying it's foolish to just pretend that she's changed because you want to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's like the kind of the fulcrum of the whole idea of the forgive and forget conflict that exists in this story, right? Like we have two characters hinging around this idea, and in the middle is Amy. The thing that I love about this is, from Carol's perspective, I can see how this makes sense in her head. Like the one beat that we hear from Carol over and over again throughout this conversation is, we failed her. She didn't have the support structure. She didn't have help. We failed her. And she's saying we, and she hints partially Victoria, but I see the guilt in Carol there. I see the implicit I failed her every time she says we. I did this. And I see that same kind of guilt that leads Amy into making shitty choices is leading her mother into making some dumb choices as well. And this got me to kind of think about how Carol rather views her two daughters, and I think why she does the things that she does. I think when Carol looks at Victoria, she sees a person that she did a fine job raising. Like, she looks at her and she says she's a superhero. She's out there helping people. She's powerful. She does good work. Yeah, she had that whole unfortunate hospital incident, but she's better now. So look, I did it. I did my job. I was a good parent to Victoria. Yay me. And then she looks at Amy and she sees a person that she didn't love and knows that her lack of love, or feels that her lack of love, caused all this. It caused Amy to make bad choices. It caused her to do what she did to Victoria. We failed her, Carol says. I failed her. So there are people that have talked about how, like, Carol only has the capacity to love one person at a time. I don't think that's true. I think Carol loves Victoria. I just think Carol thinks, like, she did her job when it comes to Victoria. And, like, she's got, like, a task list. Parent Victoria, just check mark. And then she's got another task, parent Amy, a big red X. You failed that one. And she's trying as hard as she can to fix it with Amy. And unfortunately, her fear of failing in that is driving her, too far to the extreme, to the poles of this whole thing. She feels that she has to love Amy so much that she can't see any kind of badness in her, because any kind of badness in her would be not showing her the love that she feels that she has to show her. She's, like I said, she's just as driven by this fear as she's always been. It's just in a different kind of way. And I think you can see that specifically in how Carol and Mark react to the news about what Amy said that when she took over. Like the way she immediately goes to excuses for why that's okay, or why it's our fault.
Yeah, I feel like she just expects Victoria to be able to handle things.
Right. Yeah.
Like she just simply has more respect for her, and so she's something like annoyed when Victoria can't just, like, be an adult,
right?
Which is how she would think of it. Like, come on, get over it. Which is kind of weird since she has her own trauma. But like, Amy though, she doesn't respect.
Yeah,
she sees Amy as being like her broken prodigal child.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a reference that I don't think I've made explicitly in my mind, but like, it's the classic, like the prodigal son is the one who gets all of the excess second chances, and the son who, in this case, Victoria was the good kid. She stuck around. She did what she was supposed to do. She was reliable. She was exactly what Carol wanted her to be, and that's basically being taken for granted. And I think that's kind of what Victoria's feeling here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the problem with, like, I understand Carol's want to help her daughter. I understand Carol's want to make up for what she did to course correct the frankly, terrible attitude she had toward Amy. Understandably a terrible attitude brought on by the severe trauma she was going through, but still, she admittedly did not love this child, and she and that did hurt her in some ways. But she's in this desperation to, like, not to refuse to see anything bad in Amy, to refuse to see anything bad in there. She's also putting blinders up around Victoria. She's not seeing, like, she's so desperate to fix Amy, she can't see where in Victoria there is brokenness.
Yeah. And I think this is where it's valuable that Sveta's here, because before Sveta Victoria hasn't been able to stand up for herself and be like, look at how much I'm suffering.
Right.
But Sveta sort of can be. And she, at this moment, tells her to mom the fuck up.
Yeah, I love it.
Which is not only great, like, phrasing and writing, but a great moment. And Carol just, like, seethes and says she's trying, which I think she is. She's just not great at it.
No, she's really bad at it. And it's like, she needs to mom the fuck up in many ways. She needs to mom the fuck up in Victoria and see that your daughter needs, your daughter is suffering. Your daughter is not fine. She's in a bad place. And she needs to mom the fuck up in Amy and stop being the type of parent that, like, assumes that their kid can do no wrong and, like, charges into the school and says, my kid got in trouble? That's impossible. Someone must have done something wrong. It can't be that. Stop being her best friend. Stop being her cheerleader. Be her mom. Like, that's what she needs. Like, Carol's talking about support structures but like, the support structures are just like, Amy is perfect. We love her. I can't confront her about this. I can't tell her she's doing something wrong. Like, I can't see a place in which Amy is bad, because that means that possibly means that I'm not loving her anymore. And it was my fault that I didn't love her in the past. And this is all my fault. It's our fault. She can't, like, it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess.
I mean, and there's probably some validity to the idea that if she were to come down hard on Amy, then Amy would just, like, disappear again, which I think is something she's really afraid of.
Yeah.
And is basically what's happened. So,
but I mean, I don't think that's a reason to not parent. I think, then that falls on Amy. If being told the hard truth about your past behavior causes you to flee again, then, which it does, because it did, then that's on Amy. That's not on Carol. That's not on Victoria. But Carol is completely unwilling to do that. And I like you said at the very beginning of this whole conversation, this is the central kind of argument of what the story is exploring, and it rests here in these two characters. Yeah.
So Mark goes ahead and ends the conversation as things become heated.
I really, like, we talked about him a little bit. I love his role in this. Victoria kind of sees it as a betrayal here, that he doesn't, like, specifically defend her. But I think he's kind of in a tough spot. Like, I think he's still processing what a lot of this Amy stuff means, and I'm sure he has his own concerns, and he's going through it. And I'm not sure if he's really had time to gather, like, what he thinks about this whole thing, especially since he obviously wasn't aware of the creepy, extreme villainy things that she said right before she hopped into that portal to Shin.
Yeah. It's interesting because, Sveta is there to take Victoria's side. I don't think it's accurate to say that that he is taking Carol's side here.
No.
He's more refereeing.
Right. That's what he's trying to do.
Trying to do, yeah.
But Victoria sees that, and I think Carol sees that too, as by refereeing you are refusing to be on my side, ergo I'm upset with you.
Ergo, I give you the most unimpressed look.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love the irony as this conversation wraps up. Like, Mark says we need to stop this, and Carol says if we step away without actually communicating, then it's going to be a long time before we talk to her again. She'll get ideas in her head, and communicating next time will be that much harder. So Carol is talking to Mark about Victoria in front of Victoria about their inability to communicate.
And how it's Victoria's fault.
Yeah, and it's perfect. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
Like, she's not communicating with me. Stop talking about her like she's not there. She's right there. Say that to her.
Yeah. So as they part ways, everyone is able to be civil, like, since the conversation is basically over. And Victoria leaves thinking irreconcilable differences, really. There wasn't a good way to handle this.
I think the first time I read this, the civilness of how the conversation ended really jumped out at me, because, like, Victoria went from this place of, like, the things her mom was saying were really hurting her, and they were really hurting her, to just this really casual kind of inquiry around Natalie and like a very, like, normal, like, conversation where neither one is acting like they just had this big tough thing. And when you look at that line, that irreconcilable differences line, I think that says a lot. I think she's just about done.
Yeah.
Like, irreconcilable differences is a term used in divorce proceedings, right? It's usually the most common reason for marriage separations. And I think she's able to be civil here because she's done. She's just like I am finished with this. She's in this consolidation mode, right? Like, she's reaching out and connecting and reaching back to all the ties that bind her to her teammates, and then she calls it the other team, the bonds and promises that and all the things that tied us together, the family team that she has. But I just think that she's like, after this conversation, is like, I don't need that as part of my consolidation anymore. Like, I just don't. I'm just done. And I can be civil because it doesn't matter anymore, because I don't care about this relationship anymore. Ergo, there's no reason to be upset. There's no reason to leave it upset. Just, I'm going to talk to you about business stuff. We're going to be proper. Send this to Natalie, and then I'll just go right on with my day.
Yeah, it really highlights how much worse things have become between them. Because in the first chapter, she's able to exchange text messages with her mom and be like, yeah, okay, I'll come over to the house. You know, like, that sounds nice. Sounds nice to have a evening with you guys and the family and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not like 100% all in on it, but she's gonna do it. Like, that's unimaginable now, because starting with the fact that her mom invited Amy to that thing, and then her mom repeatedly doubling down on this notion of, like, basically siding with Amy.
Yeah.
It's just made it impossible for her. And it's deteriorated to the point where she's using this term irreconcilable differences, which means unfixable.
Yeah.
So
we cannot fix this. I love what she says to her dad. Like, I can't keep putting my hand in the fire and getting burned. Like, I can't. This relationship is no longer healthy for me. And I can't keep doing it. And I mean, it's sad. I want her to have a healthy relationship with her parents. I think there's strength that you can get from family that you can't get other places. But I mean, she's right. Like, I wouldn't want to keep going to a conversation and having a relationship with a person who casually mentions mind control in front of me, like, without any kind of acknowledgement that is what happened to me and how much it damaged and hurt me. And, like, why would you want that in your life? And until Carol shows that she gets that. Yeah.
So Victoria and Sveta head to meet up with the rest of the team now, who are waiting in the cold, holographically disguised. Aaron is there too, and the Ashleys are only present via projections.
My favorite part of this is Byron, who's just, like, chilling. Like, everyone's like huddled in the cold, and Byron's just standing there in his, like, innate cold resistance, just going like, yeah, this is nice.
Yeah.
There were a few people that were posted. I can't remember if this is in the thread or in our Discord, that were talking about they hope that Byron was going to take a more active role as a member of this team after the events of the last arc. his presence here, like it being him here ready to hang out and shop, is a hint that I think that he is indeed like probably feeling more of a member of this team than he has before, is going to take probably a more active role in this thing than he had in the past.
Yeah, I think that's meant to be a sign that is the case.
Yeah.
So Kenzie has apparently made all this tech for everybody, but she still hasn't fixed her own hairpin that hides her scar, because we can see she's kind of hid her scar with her hair. So Kenzie's obviously so happy that everybody's here and has apparently been staying up all night tinkering because she's so happy. So she's doing that again. So Victoria points out that she's hugging everybody and suggests that if she has rules, she should stick to them.
Yeah. I love how this is like really, it's doled out to us in such a great but depressing way. Like, I don't want to believe that Kenzie's just as bad, if not worse, than she was in the past, but we keep getting this evidence that things are starting to spiral a little bit for her. And I mean, the breaking of her strict rules is a big sign, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to believe it. Like, I don't want to believe that this is happening, but like, because I was so proud of her, and I don't think backsliding, takes away from the progress you've made. It's a part of the process, right? But it's still a bummer.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if I understand what is going on in her head right now. So it could be something where it's part of her growth process, and it could be a really bad thing that needs to be addressed by everyone,
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, and if you'll indulge me for a minute here, I want to connect this back to the whole Carol and Amy thing a bit.
okay.
Carol's whole argument is that Amy deserves a second chance, that she's changed, that she's better, and then refuses to acknowledge even the idea that she could be backsliding. Won't listen to any arguments, won't hear any evidence that says that she might return to old ways. She refused to do that. Kenzie here has changed. Kenzie also deserves a second chance. Kenzie has made progress, but instead of this 100% like blind implicit support of Kenzie, Victoria challenges her here. She sits down and says, I don't want to be the bad guy or make you feel like I'm not happy to see you, but your behavior is concerning me. You have these rules. You need to stick to your rules. That's an important thing so far. She is being, and I know she's not Kenzie's parent, but she is being more of a parent to Kenzie than Carol has been to Amy in any of the chapters we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Carol doesn't seem to have any kind of realistic model of how people recover from stuff, because she's basically
because she hasn't herself.
Yeah,
yeah,
she's just like white knuckled her own trauma for her whole life,
right,
without any actual healing.
Yeah. That, I mean, again, Victoria, not Kenzie's mom, but she just mommed the fuck out of that right there.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Aaron is flirting with Rain, and Rain is being really Rain about it.
Rain.
And then Vicky stands for the ship and thinks, inch over half a foot, Rain, put your arm around her. I thought, warm her up.
Vicky stands for the ship, Matt? Did you write that? You wrote that down and then you said it out loud.
Look, it's important that we keep up with the changes in English language so that people can understand us in the future.
This podcast is over.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna keep going. So Victoria steps up to lead the shopping mission. Let's stay out of trouble, she said. I said.
We're only one chapter into the shopping mission, and so far they have stayed out of trouble. So that's good, but this feels very ominous. Like it feels like it's so obviously ominous that it could be just subverting us a little bit. I hope so, but
yeah. I'm sure it doesn't mean anything, Scott.
See, you've read the next chapter, and that's not fair.
I'm just going to keep going. So 10.2, Kenzie gives Victoria and Sveta their holoprojectors. I think it's actually a really good idea to disguise Victoria when the team is out in public, like pragmatically, because otherwise doxing her whole team would just be a matter of following around the well-known Victoria Dallin and taking pictures of whoever she's hanging out with. Yeah,
I totally agree. Like, Victoria is like outed as a superhero. Everyone knows her face. Everyone knows who she is. She doesn't really have, like, she has a superhero name, but like she's free with her identity most of the times. And that's just something that's like put on her team, right? Like, yeah. They didn't have an option in that. And it's mostly because that decision was made for Victoria ages ago. So now she's just kind of chaining forward that decision-making progress on these people. So in the time between when these 2 chapters came out, I had convinced myself that the conflict of this oncoming chapter was going to happen when someone recognized Victoria from the show. I was like, this is what's going to happen. I can't believe she's just going out there. So I was kind of happy to see that, we have this method of disguising that. So not that I don't think conflict's not going to happen. It's going to. It's a book. But at least this intro of the chapter like calmed my nerves about it happening right here in the chapter I was currently reading, which it does not. So that was good, at least.
I think that's actually great, because it's actually pretty important to sometimes tell the reader in a book in general, like, hey, you can calm down and pay attention to this part.
Right.
Nothing's going to explode in the near future. And it lets you like perceive the story the way it's supposed to be, instead of having heart palpitations the whole time.
And I think there have been moments in this book where, like, I think you and I were like so paranoid and stressed in some of the earlier chapters that I think we let ourselves get away from that a little bit. We were trying to search for the mysteries behind the characters instead of just letting the chapters roll out. And I think that's, if I look at the reason that is, I think it's because the mystery behind Jessica's one of these people is really bad question seemed like it was going to be a much more quickly solved dilemma. So we were like trying to parse out who's it going to be, instead of it being this kind of long doled out mystery that we have behind all these characters. So when I look back and think back about the conversations we had right around the introduction of this team and that, I was so stressed.
Yeah. And that was what a lot of the conversation in like the Reddit threads in the the chapter Reddit threads was too, because people were just really, really wanted to solve that. But yeah, it's maybe something to be taken at a slower pace.
Yeah.
So so go ahead.
No, I just wonder, like, if not reading it chapter by chapter, and focusing on a chapter at a time in a lot of detail, if I would have had that same reaction then. But regardless, it's set up here well. I did not go into this chapter thinking doom was going to happen.
Yeah, me too. So Kenzie mentions that she'll just leave the institution that she's staying at whenever she feels like it, and nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they completely don't care. Like, Victoria is listening to her. She's just trying to, I think, understand and like get to the root of what she's saying. But yeah, I mean, I think this is another hint that Kenzie is in a bad way right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Victoria has this thought: I hope that Damsel wouldn't be a bad influence on Swansong.
I want to know your take on this, Matt, because we've talked about in the past how we've seen actually the opposite of this, that we've seen it's possible, at least we're guessing, but it seems like Swansong is having a good influence on Damsel. But, things aren't this black and white. People aren't on and off switches. And we're seeing with Kenzie here that even though you can make large progress and get better, backsliding can still happen. So I wonder, like, could Damsel start to wear off in Swansong in some negative ways? Could this be the arc of the backslide?
Interesting. I hope not. I think that we've seen Swansong borderline roll her eyes at Damsel's behavior, which kind of suggests to me like, no, she sees this as comical and ridiculous now. Right. And like, there may be certain things she can learn from Damsel, like, since Damsel has kind of dealt with her issues in a very different way. She may be able to pick up some techniques, and it may make it so that her approach to certain things is different, but I don't think it will be worse. And also, we haven't really seen any evidence that Damsel is bad. Yeah,
I mean, she still hasn't done anything bad. Like, right. she's very much all talk, which I think is very true to who Damsel always was. Even way back when we met her in the Boston games. But yeah, she hasn't executed on that and executed anyone.
Right.
So yeah, so far, fingers crossed.
And I don't want it to happen. So
no, absolutely not. But yeah.
All right. So Kenzie sits between. She sets up the two women with their hairpins and is completely oblivious to the complete head trip brought on by making Victoria not look like herself because she has body dysphoria, and making Sveta look like a not K53 for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Man, I loved everything about this scene. I loved exactly how it played out. I thought the writing was perfect and how both of these characters experience this profound weirdness and both the positive and negative sides of what is happening to them.
Yeah. They're full of so many tumbling emotions, and also it kind of helps to have Kenzie just completely oblivious and babbling on.
Yeah, Ken's is completely oblivious and babbling on, and the Ashleys are like probably aware. They see the babbling, but they're also probably aware that like Victoria and Sveta are going through some shit, and they like call and pull Kenzie away and like let them have their private time. I just love like the construct on this, and Kenzie's obliviousness is so wonderful to me because. Like, it's easy to forget with these Tinkers sometimes that they're still little kids, and she might like have this great complicated understanding of stuff related to her powers, but like people is still like a big blind spot for her. She just doesn't really get people that well. And so it makes perfect sense that she would just be completely unaware of and hadn't even really thought of the implications of what this technology would do for Victoria and especially Sveta.
Yeah, that was an early character trait of hers that I just haven't noticed as much recently, but just her being very bad at social skills on top of her need to know what everyone's doing all the time. Yeah, well, I think she's just been like so busy at doing the Tinker stuff that there hasn't been room for her to be bad at social skills. Yeah, like there hasn't been time. Yeah, right. I agree.
Well, there's the other things I wanted to touch on here before we move on. I mean, first of all, like the both the simultaneous like tragic and wonderful realization around Sveta, like this is everything she wanted, but it's only an illusion. It's not perfect. Like I love like the smoothing technology doesn't work, so it's like it's better, but it's not quite there. And we'll get into this more when she gets naked in a bit. But the other thing I really love is this, like Victoria has this real moment. She's got her dysphoria going on, but she's got this real moment where she realizes like this is the first time in her life she's truly gotten to wear a mask, where she's truly gotten to be a person different from, you know, the person that she is and escape Victoria Dallin and escape the expectations and ideas behind, you know, herself. And again, this goes back to the decision by her old team, the decision by New Wave that presumably, I don't think we've ever been explicitly told this, but presumably was made without Victoria's consent or her opinion on anything to unmask, to reveal themselves to the world, and the burden that put on her. I don't think that can be understated.
Yeah, and it's not something she thinks about a lot in those terms. I mean, she's clearly aware and has said before that she likes being recognized. Right. But I think that part of that is like when you have something in your life that isn't optimal, you make the best of it. Right. And then that becomes the truth for you. Yeah. And I think that's what she's kind of done with the fact that she's the out superhero, while maybe there has been a part of her that wishes she could be incognito, and this is the first time that that's actually been a possibility. So yeah, and the book describes it that way perfectly, right? It says something to the effect of, we didn't write it down, but something to the effect of like a burden was lifted off of me I didn't even realize I had. Yeah. It's never even been something she's considered before, and suddenly she has this moment of realization, and man, they run with it. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, the others leave the bathroom to let Victoria and Sveta have some time, and the two women agree to take full advantage of their new identities. Yeah, and I love this. Like I said, there's a way you could look at this as you know, being a moment of triggering some of the worst truths about their situation. That like Victoria will never be a person that's not recognized. Like that's just not in the cards for her. Sveta most likely will never have a human body, and that there's tragedy to that, but that's not what today is about, right? Today is about consolidation. Today is about coming together and enjoying each other's companies and finding those strengths and the bonds between each other. So they're just like,
screw that bad stuff. We're going to run with it. We're going to enjoy this, and we're going to enjoy our day. And that's wonderful. Like, sometimes you just need that. It's like, put that bad shit aside. We will deal with that. But today, let's take comfort in each other and take comfort in this.
Yeah, it's the ultimate superpowered shopping trip.
Yeah.
So they start out at a thrift store because, face it, thrift stores have all the best stuff. I really like everything about Victoria's authoritative opinions on fashion and style. It's just very authentic feeling. And basically, the way it's conducted, this shopping is like shopping therapy for both of them, actually.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. I love, like, we've talked before about Victoria's, fashion as identity character trait. And she's truly in her element here. Like Victoria is two things, right? She's a cape nerd and she's fashion nerd. And these are two things that she just knows she's good at, and she's unquestionably good at them, and she knows it. And not in like an arrogant way. Like, she doesn't, like, it's not like, I'm the best at this, blah, 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 blah. Like, here it's just like, I'm good at this. If you need my advice, come ask me. I'm going to help you. We're going to dive into these clothes, and through the exploration of these clothes and these styles, we are going to build you an identity as a person. And it's something that Sveta has never gotten to do before. Like she says here that, yeah, I just went out and like just got some quick clothes. I didn't really have time to think about it. I just got some stuff. Some of it was stuff Weld liked. Some of it was just stuff they had. I've never gotten to do this before. I've never gotten to construct my identity around fashion like this. And Victoria's like, fuck yeah, that's my jam. Let's do it.
Yeah. And Victoria is like getting out of her head and
right.
being fully present for this. And Sveta is also kind of like, I think, enjoying the attention, enjoying the opportunity to do this thing where she's making choices about her identity and maybe getting to feel normal in a way that she doesn't normally.
Yeah, and I love how that's represented in kind of Sveta's growing confidence as the trip like continues, as they go more places and try on new things and do like, and it's kind of capped off by at the end she picks the coat that she had wanted in the first place but wasn't comfortable with it, and put it back to get to do something else. Yeah, she is for probably the first time in her life not defined by, you know, her case 53ness, but defined as just a person who's trying to you know, figure out who they are.
Yeah, I love it. I like this quote from Victoria. I'm betting there was something, maybe you second guessed it, or you were looking for something specific and your eye passed over it because it wasn't what you were looking for. This is me every time I go shopping.
Yeah, same. This is why I bring my wife with me now, because I'm like, I like this shirt. And she's like, okay, get it. And I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right. It takes way longer.
I'm really bad at fashion shopping. My wife is my Victoria, and because she knows how I operate and helps me here.
I've gotten better over time, but it's taken me so many years.
Yeah,
being alive. So they go to the changing rooms, and Sveta is a mix of disappointed and relieved to find that her new holographic body doesn't extend under her clothes.
I love the complexity of this moment. Like,
yeah.
Like, on the one hand, you have Sveta like riding high with this illusion of normalcy that's kind of shattered the second she looks down at the rest of her body, and it reveals it for what it is, a complete illusion. On the other hand, thank God Kenzie is not taking naked pictures of people.
Yeah,
thank God.
I mean, she probably is.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, yeah. Damn it, you're right. And I love it. Like, the text describes it as, I'm not, like, Sveta says out loud, I'm not sure there's a word for this kind of disappointment and relief. There might be a German one, but there's certainly not in English.
Yeah, right. So this kind of moment of vulnerability segues into Sveta opening up to Victoria about her metal boy problems. Sveta worries that she's effectively Weld's live-in sister because there isn't a physical component to their relationship. She feels like she has nothing to give him. Even her cooking doesn't really do anything for him.
The thing, I loved reading and rereading this passage because the thing is, like, you when you read it a few times, you kind of see like how absurd Sveta's being. Like, not to say like that the feelings that she's having are not normal. They're absolutely normal. And I think everyone that's ever been in a relationship has had these insecurities about, I'm not pulling my weight, I'm not living up to my expectations, and I'm making him unhappy or her unhappy because of this. But Sveta, like, stop putting all this on yourself, like making it your fault. Weld can't taste stuff very well, and I can't find food he likes. Weld can't feel very well, and therefore we have very bad physical intimacy, and it's my fault because I'm failing to do it. He's a giant metal man.
Yeah.
The reason why these things is because he has his own issues and things going on. She as she's going through this thing, she paints this like picture of Weld as this just like normal, everyday, average man that's just completely normal in every way, and like he's expecting normalcy in his relationship. It's like, no, he's a case 53 too. He's made of metal.
Yeah, it's not like if she were a baseline human that she would be any better at addressing these issues that he has.
Right. And she's just like, I'm just Sveta, child, like you're being too hard on yourself here. Like, I understand it's frustrating. I understand feeling the insecurity. I think it's completely valid to feel that way at times, but he's going through some shit too. Like you can't assume that because you have these completely understandable insecurities related to yourself that it's all your fault.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah, I agree. So Victoria says that maybe, though, what she can give him is a shoulder to cry on, someone to be vulnerable with, because men don't usually have that by default.
Yeah. A little overgeneralizing there, Victoria. But I do love her advice, though. I love when she says it's not about equality. It's about balance. It's not about, tit for tat. It's not about I did this, so you did this. It's finding a way to get to a point where both people feel like things are balanced. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, what these two people need to do is talk to each other, communicate about these things. Like, if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling that you're not upholding your portion of the relationship, your part of the balance, tell the other person that. Say, I feel like I'm not living up to my responsibilities. And then, as part of being in a relationship, if they say no, I don't agree, trust that they're telling you the truth. Like, that's the hard thing about trust, is that you have to trust that if they say no, everything's fine. Like, you are like, I love you, I love this, things are going good. You gotta choose to believe them.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a sign of her insecurity by itself that she is having these conversations with Victoria and probably Tristan too, and probably not with Weld. I mean, he's been gone, but right, I kind of feel like she's just she kind of hero worships him on top of all that, which is a wrinkle that I don't think I've ever had to deal with in a relationship. In a relationship,
no one's ever worshipped you as a hero, Matt?
No,
bummer.
No, not yet. But yeah, so this conversation eventually kind of peters out, though, and it's interesting because they've had a couple conversations that like took a sharp turn.
Yeah.
And this one, it turns into talking about what they're kind of thinking of, or what Victoria's thinking of as the elephant in the room, powers, and specifically the agents, or the what we call the shards.
Yeah.
And I like so Sveta gets this great line, great paragraph really. We chase these bright lights that our powers give us, but in reality, Scion was just a glowy ball on the forehead of an anglerfish, so much bigger and more vicious than he appeared to be, and he was strong before. The problems we're dealing with are the same. Two people stuck in one body, one person stuck in a monstrous body, a bunch of powers being shared around and tossed together. They aren't small or insignificant, really, but they're nothing compared to the massive, powerful engines that are behind them. They're decoys, the pinky toes of giants. And then they also bring up Kepri as an example of a cape whose shard clearly malfunctioned, which makes Victoria think of Amy, and it does bring up the bad feelings, but they don't take root, she says. She's able to move past that moment. Yeah,
like because she's in a good place right now. She's with a person she cares about. Maybe, well, she doesn't have the mask on at this point, because I do like the detail of this entire conversation. The first thing Sveta says is, "Can you take off your illusion? Because I want to talk to your face and see you when I talk to you about this kind of stuff."
But, yeah, I like that too. So Victoria is pushing towards something, though. There's this half-articulated idea, and she doesn't think they'll be able to make this second chance on Gimel work if the shards aren't addressed somehow.
Yeah, and I think this is the connecting thing to what we were talking about in the first chapter, is this idea, this fundamental shift in the goalposts of this story. Like, if powers are trauma, then dealing with the agent, dealing with the shard, dealing with the passenger, like is saying we need to deal with the root of our trauma. And so you can look at everything they've done before as just, survival mechanisms. They're trying to live with this trauma, but turning towards the big mama, the big, inciting incident. This is our trauma personified. It is kind of a decision to refocus and move towards real, long lasting recovery.
Right. I mean, as we've been saying forever, the metaphor of the powers is that they are the manifestation of the trauma. So via the metaphor, if you're really serious about fixing the trauma, then in some sense you're talking about fixing the powers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or at least dealing with them. Like just like the It's Complicated cards, just like the secrets, the agents, the powers have been this like unspoken, I think they describe it as an elephant in the room. And I love the light on the forehead of an anglerfish. I love that image. It's great. But we have kind of been like just not dealing with that, just like going for the day to survive. And that's why I love this Sveta quote you read so much, is like, the things that we're dealing with are not small and insignificant. Like the ability to survive, to cope with the terrible shit that's going on, is not small or insignificant. It's big and it's hard, but it's nothing compared to the work of getting to the root of these traumas and finding a way to push through them. Like, and that's like the story, a pivot that we've been kind of talking about and seeing from the first chapter. We're kind of seeing our characters make both literal and metaphorical shifts into being ready to do that kind of work.
Yeah. I like the notion of connecting a trauma with like a continent-sized alien evil force.
Right. Yeah. It's big. It's impossibly big. You don't even know how to. It's so big you can't even comprehend it. Like it's perfect. I love it.
Yeah. So they meet back up with the Ashleys, and Victoria and Ashley have what passes for banter within their bizarre friendship. So Victoria doesn't make any comments really on her clothes, and Ashley says, "No condemnations, no calls for more color." "Nah," I said, "I know what you're capable of. That I could take your head clean off your shoulders if I needed. More like I know you can live up to a style this severe."
Which is like a super compliment from Victoria. It's like, nah, that's you, and you can pull it off. They're like style buddies. I love it. I love I don't know girls' fashion. I said this on Twitter. I don't know girls' fashion. I don't know it. I'm not a girl. I don't wear these kind of clothes. I don't spend a lot of time examining it, but I love what Ashley wears. I love how it's described. And I think the reason is because I think Victoria likes it too. Like, it's not her, but she likes it. She likes and she respects Ashley's ability to put an outfit together. So the way she describes it is always like super, like, this is badass. This is a great look. Like, she pulls it off. I love it.
I was going to say, I don't either, but that's not true because I have to dress two girls.
There you go.
Pick out their outfits. So
I haven't had to worry about this.
The key is leggings, just leggings.
I can tell you, same with my wife. So many leggings. So you know how expensive Lululemon leggings are, Matt? Holy shit.
Well, if the 1 square foot of cloth required to make kid leggings and the correlation with their price extrapolates to Lulu leggings for adults, then I can't imagine.
It's a lot.
So Ashley mentions that Kinsey is almost as bad as when they first met. She says better in some ways, but in others.
Yeah. ... So what is your interpretation of that?
Well, by default, I specifically thought it was referring to the fact that she's not sleeping, and I don't know what else though, because that's the thing. I don't feel like I have a read on what's going on with Kinsey right now.
Mm-hmm. But the thing I like about it is I think it shows the how dynamic the characters are, because characters are not like, they don't have on-off switch, right? There's not a recovery switch. Like, yes, this person's not real, but they're a well-drawn, well-crafted character. So you don't just recover all at once. You don't just say, okay, I've had my breakthrough and now I'm all better. It's like some things get better. Like you have a breakthrough in one portion and you've come to realize one thing about yourself, and you've been able to take that thing you've learned and improve your behavior in this one aspect of your personality. But people are complicated, and just because you've made improvements in one side of you doesn't mean you've made improvements in other sides of you, and doesn't mean that you can't still be bad stuff going on. And I think that's something that I will admit that I've failed to take into account when talking about some of the other characters in this story. Like Rain had his breakthrough. Rain's doing great. Well, we see in this chapter that no, he's not. Like he's actually has a really rough time in the small tiny bit we see him in this chapter. Yeah, he knows who he is. He's more confident. He's not better. Ashley's not better. They've just made progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they suffer a lot less, but like you have to wonder if Rain, anticipated having this much trouble at the mall. He probably did. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because he's so laid back, it's easy to forget about him. But yeah, like it's fully expected that he would be having a hard time at the mall. So
yeah.
Yeah, so now after having done their shopping, they all meet up in the food court near a big pile of anti-parahuman banners and signs.
I love this backdrop for this conversation. Like nothing bad has happened here yet, but we've got our team of capes. Everyone's a little shaken. Everyone is struggling to figure out what happens next. They're coming together. What's going to happen? What's next? What's going on? Victoria's got a new mission. She hasn't really shared it with anyone but Sveta yet. And in the midst of all this, in the background is hate speech and representative of the feeling towards them in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that like the details of what these bad things say is never actually described to us, right? There's never a moment where it's like, this sign says this and this thing says this. Like it's held back from us. It's almost as if like Victoria doesn't want to bring herself to actually acknowledge it, right? Like it's like, I don't want to read them. It's just like, there's bad signs, they're bad. Yeah. We get specific confirmation by Byron going to Spanish to describe the horror of what he's seeing. But it's just there. It's just in front of us, and we don't delve into the detail of it.
Right. Yeah. It lets you assume the worst, right?
Right.
Because if we didn't, because it could just be like, we want laws.
No.
It's like no, it's probably not that.
It's probably God hates capes.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. So now as the chapter wraps up, when Kinsey is out of earshot, they bring up Chris, and Ashley seems concerned about what's going to be done about the situation. And then there are a few moments and some back and forth where it's clear that everybody shares the same understanding. Everybody except Ashley, that is, shares the same understanding that Chris went with Amy because it could help with his physical issues. That's why he did it. But Swansong wraps up the chapter telling us, no, that's not why he did it. Amy was deferring to Chris. Chris was the one in charge.
Yeah, and that's a fun little revelation there at the end of the chapter and at the end of our reading of the week. I said this in Twitter, and I'll repeat myself. Sorry for those that follow us in both places. I do remember reading the line of, is that okay? Where she turns to Chris and says that, and he nods. And I remember that jumping out at me. It was like, well, I mean, what does that mean? And I think my internal explanation was, she's just not used to giving big speeches, and she was looking for a little support, how she delivered the big speech. And he was there to offer that kind of support. And that's how I kind of internally rationalized it. So he really didn't bring it up in our conversation. I didn't know what to do with it. And I kind of rationalized. I pushed it away. And
yeah. I think I had the same reaction.
So this is a pretty big shift here. The mystery that is Chris continues to get juicier.
Yes.
With each passing chapter.
It's just always so delightful. I'm so excited about the Chris situation.
Yeah. So is this something that like we just take at face value, that like Ashley is really good at recognizing power dynamics between people? We've had this pretty like concretely confirmed?
I think so. I feel like this is one of those moments where this is being revealed to us, like the placement at the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's Ashley saying it and she's the one who like she pays attention to these things. She was, if anybody was going to notice it was going to be her. So.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, I mean, there are some things that I think in this book is you read it and you're made to doubt the legitimacy of it, and there's some things that you're just not. And this feels like the latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a pretty big fundamental shift in how we thought things were going on. I think it makes more sense for Amy as a character. I never really like completely bought her as I'm gonna take control and be in power. Like I think Victoria completely accepted it, and maybe the reason why we didn't really chase down that rabbit hole of why did she say that to him was because Victoria was so utterly convinced that it was Amy taking over, because that was inevitable. She knew that was going to happen. She was predicting that from the beginning. So I think it works in that way, and I kind of like it even more now with that in mind.
Yeah, I agree, because like the Amy we know from Worm would never have done that. But but we've been convinced by Victoria that maybe she would. But it's like, no, I don't see her that way.
Yeah.
So
what the hell is Chris planning, Matt?
I don't know.
This is crazy.
Well, I'm sure everyone has theories.
Yeah.
All right. That was 2 awesome opening chapters to Arc 10. So we've been promising everyone that we're going to do Name Game for Byron and Tristan for like
a long time,
several months. So we're going to try to do that here, and hopefully not do that thing where we miss like the main thing that was important and like the key that unlocks the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So Byron literally means cowshed. But that probably wasn't why his parents named him that. It may have been a reference to Lord Byron, a British romantic author. And he was the guy who wrote Don Juan, which is a story about a guy who has a lot of sex. I think maybe other things happen. Byron...
I think maybe other things happen.
Lord Byron had many love affairs and was regarded by the social sphere as mad, bad, and dangerous to know. And he led a life of gallivanting adventure, traveling and fighting and all kinds of stuff. Kind of extra trivia, he was the father of Ada Lovelace, who is regarded as the first computer programmer.
So that doesn't sound like our Byron at all, Matt.
No, not really. Yeah, I was digging for some kind of thing that would connect to our Byron more clearly. And I did not find anything. I'm not saying that I may be missing something. there may be some other literary work of his that connects better to Byron's character.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to get into something you discovered at the very end that I like more than just the Lord Byron connection. But let's move on to Tristan.
All right. Tristan literally means tumult or outcry. And Tristan was a knight of the Round Table. Tristan and Isolde, or Isolde, there's all kinds of pronunciations of these things because they're so old. The legend is of Tristan and Isolde, and they drink a love potion, which makes them fall madly in love with each other, which is a form of mind control, which I thought was interesting to see.
It is.
But Isolde marries Tristan's uncle, and then the love potion compels the two of them to be adulterous. So basically, this was a way for Arthurian age folks to be able to write about adultery without making the characters seem like villains because they're compelled to be adulterous, which is kind of a clever literary workaround.
Yeah, that is clever, yeah.
As with most Arthurian legends, there are like 15 different versions of this story with different details. So you can dig around, and I'm sure you could find some other parallels to our character. Many of these end with Tristan being killed either by his uncle or in the course of saving somebody else. That's kind of all I have to say about the two names individually.
So get to the thing that I loved this.
So I think I'm reaching, honestly. I think this is reaching, but by and try could be references to 2 and 3, which could imply like a missing older sibling who would be like the Uno sibling, assuming that there's some reference to birth order, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part that I think you're reaching on is the missing older sibling, the missing older sibling part. But I mean, I think the buy and try part feels very intentional, and what that's going to say about the missing piece of this whole equation is very fascinating to me.
Yeah, like I agree. I feel like there's something there, but I don't feel like my interpretation is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. I don't feel like I found the nugget of gold at the heart of there's Tristan. Yeah, there's not like one thing that we said, aha, this is it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's all, keep in mind, like, we're not done with these characters yet, so it might not have just revealed itself to us.
Yeah. Well, and it could just literally be like no more complicated than whichever one of their parents or both perhaps have a thing for like literature, and so they would be familiar with the legend of Tristan and Isolde. They'd be familiar with Lord Byron. They're romantics, and these are the names of two figures that are associated with a romantic. It doesn't have to like within the story. It makes perfect sense that you have two brothers with these names, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good or they just wanted to name their kid after a cowshed.
Yeah, or cowshed and yelling kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe one of them pooped their diaper like immediately.
Yeah.
When they were born, and the other one was crying, and then they're like, "Well, you're poo kid, and you're crying kid."
You're poo kid. Oh, that explains Byron's problem so much.
Yeah.
His parents just called him poo kid.
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
All right. So discussion question this week. What is your favorite heartwarming Parahumans moment?
Yeah, I think this is a good, like, much more kind of casual question that we've had the last few. This is the thing where we're starting out a new arc and we don't have a clear direction of where this thing's going yet. So just a fun little, just talk to us about the stuff that you love in this book that makes your heart feel all good. Yeah,
and this came to me because I was realizing, actually due to a couple of the other like shows we've done in the last couple of weeks, like I have realized that it kind of grates on me when stories are just like the same tonally all the way through, just like monotone.
Right.
And Parahumans is really good about giving you these moments of heartwarming and weaving in the tension and the drama and the excitement with a good amount of like, aw. So
yeah.
Yes, those moments.
Yeah.
And that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on Twitter @gotwormpod. I heard that they might be removing the like button from Twitter to improve discourse, because that's the problem with Twitter is the like button.
That's what I'm always thinking.
Yeah. So my personal Twitter is @ScottDaily85, and Matt's is @the missing third brother Uno Minadale.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other podcasts we do over at doofmedia.com. We've got new episodes of Vow to View this week. We've got a new episode of the Doofcast. I think we're going to do finishing the Matrix trilogy of our Wachowski marathon. I think that's what we decided on the Doofcast. We also had the book club last weekend, so the audio file for our Dune book club is now out. If you subscribe to that podcast, you can get that in your feed, or you can watch the audio recording on YouTube. It was a great talk. I loved talking Dune. If you haven't checked that out yet, do so.
Yeah, me too. That's one of my formative books, so please check that podcast out. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses, like voting in our quarterly fan art contest and costume contest, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks to new Bidoof Alejandro 1 at the $1 level. Thanks so much.
He's the Alejandro Uno. So there would be like by Handro.
By the yeah, exactly. And as always, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, no matter what number you are. patreon.com/wildbow and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
And if you can't afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. There are tons of ways you can still help this podcast out. You can share it with literally everyone you know. And you can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from who gives us 5 stars and says, I read all 7,000 pages of Worm. I didn't know when you laid it all out like that, it was 7,000. Jesus. A little over a year ago, and around 2 months of burning my eyes late at night while I clicked next chapter over and over again. Needless to say, I really enjoyed it. After waiting a few months before catching up on the sequel Ward, I heard about this podcast analyzing the original as well as the sequel. I postponed listening to it until my evening runs became so boring that I had to get something to listen to. Just as I regretted waiting so long to start Ward, I regret waiting on this podcast. I caught up around the same time it took me to read Worm originally, and that's saying something, as this podcast could be as engrossing to listen to as Worm was to read. Holy shit, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
These guys do an amazing job analyzing, critiquing, and appraising Weeble Bobble's masterpieces. The amount of information and quality surpasses most college English classes. Seriously, you guys should do a course on Worm. And in 30 years, when Worm is required reading for high school students, this podcast will be required listening alongside. Chirophagus. And then they say, P.S. It's pronounced Zythus.
And they just spell it
and they just respelled it.
Yeah, which is excellent.
So Zythus, I guess if you're listening to this right now, that means you're like running, right? Like you're like, as you're listening to this, you are jogging. So stop. Why are you doing it? Are you tired? Are you here? I'll run alongside. How you doing, Zythus? Can we take a break? I'm really tired.
Oh my god!
It's been like 5 miles, Zythus. Can we stop now?
All right.
That's
all for this week. We'll continue Polarize next week.
And don't forget to send in those costume contest pictures. Check the website for the rules and stuff, and